to the Imagine Me podcast. Imagine me, imagine you, imagine us. I am Lily Price. Imagine yourself in a space where women can laugh and learn to value themselves by creating a deeper relationship with the divine. Imagine yourself free. What do you imagine? Welcome to the Imagine Me Bible study, where today we are going to start with our girl Esther. This is the first session. One thing about me is I like to really dig deep. Well, I don't want to say deep, but just give some background about the history of the time that we're in, the history of the way folks are thinking, just so everybody can have like a vision of what Esther is thinking, what the king is thinking, and what the people are thinking, and what the circumstances are for that time. So, as we talk about Esther, when I look back, I think about when I was a little girl and people talked about Esther being this orphan and how she just became the next queen of Persia, and then she busted down the doors and saved her people. That's awesome. But what caused that? What was the importance of that? How did we get here? One thing that I really love about the Lord, yes, the Lord, is that everything kind of fits together like a puzzle. Every book means something. Every scripture means something. Every chapter, every person. God is always intentional. When we read about him and we read certain stories, they're not coming from anything. There's always a history. So as we jump into the book of Esther, we can't really jump into the book of Esther until we jump into the book of Ezra. So I'm not going to go too deep into Ezra, but I do want to just give some background about the time of Persia, how we got to King Xerxes, how we got to Esther, how we got to Mordecai, and the culture of that time, and why the Jews are in Persia in the first place. So when we think about the book of Esther, why are the Jews in Persia? And what does that look like for the Jews? What's the way of thinking? You know, I think for me, when I look at or think about when I was a young person, in my head, I was like, were the Jews slaves at that time? Like, why were they in Persia? What was the purpose of that? Well, just to kind of give you some background, and I have my notes because your girl was studying on this. Yes, just a little bit. But as I'm looking at my notes, please take notes. And then also, folks that are watching this, I love comments. I love correction. I love different ways of thinking. My way is not the right way. My way is what my spirit is showing me. But you know what's great? God can show you something totally different, and then we can go back and forth, and iron sharpens iron. And that is the wonderful thing about God. There's always something new. So not everybody is going to read something and take it the same way. So please, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your feedback. And I also encourage folks to read this for themselves. Don't just do don't just go by whatever I'm saying. Read it for yourself. Okay? So we look at the foundation in the background of the time of Persia. What is the time? The Persian Empire, right? And so in 598 BC was the captivity of the Babylonians, and they conquered Israel. And the Jews became slaves at this time. And so they were enslaved. And in 50 years, we have King Cyrus. And this is in the book of Ezra. When we look at Ezra chapter 1, King Cyrus comes and he's like, look, we're freeing these Jews and we're going to rebuild the temple. And so at that time, there were probably, I don't know, maybe about 50,000 Jews that went back to their homeland, right? I mean, you got to think, like, they were slaves for a while. And so 50,000 of these Jews decide, well, about 50,000 decide, we're going to go back to Jerusalem. But most of the Jews, because that's where they were, they stayed in Persia. So I want to say that there was probably about hundreds of thousands of Jews that stayed in Persia at that time. The Jews went back to Judea. Let me correct myself. So they went back to Judea, and then they rebuilt and began to rebuild the temple. And King Cyrus really felt like this was something that should be done. And when we look in Ezra chapter 1, it says, in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. So, see, here we go. We got Jeremiah in there. So, that's a whole nother book of the Bible that has something to do with our girl Esther. The Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, the king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. And you have to think, like, the kingdom of Persia, like, it was huge. And we're going to get into that because they're going to talk about it in the first chapter of Esther. And he appointed me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem in Judea. Any of his people among you may go to Jerusalem in Judah, not Judea, your girl. Okay. Any of his people among you may go to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may the God be with them. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. So this is King Cyrus, right? The Lord spoke to him. One of the things that I think is so awesome is that God can talk to anybody. Oftentimes we feel like he can only talk to our pastor. He can only talk to the head of leadership. He can only talk to the people that are on TV giving the words, and they have these mega churches. But please understand that God is all of everything, all knowing. He's omni. He can do whatever he wants to do. He can speak to anyone he wants to. I mean, right now, when we think about our nation today, it seems a little cray-cray, I would admit. But God could change that at any instance. He can speak to whomever he wants. He's all powerful. So he takes the king of Persia, who is over 127 provinces. I don't know if it was at this time, but we know in the time of Esther that it is. So it's a huge kingdom. And he talks to King Cyrus and he tells him, listen, I need my temple rebuilt and I need my people to be free. Let them go back to Jerusalem and Judah, and let's get this going, because God is on, he's on time. Like, he's detailed. He knows when is the right time for things to happen. So Cyrus the Great ruled from 550 to 530 BC. And then after that, similar to the Book of Kings, I really would encourage folks to go back and read the Book of Kings, like Second Kings, especially. When you look in the books of Kings, First Kings and Second Kings, there were these good kings and then there were these bad kings. And that's why it's called the Book of Kings. But similar to this, you have King Cyrus who comes in and he's like, listen, it's time to rebuild the temple. But then when he passes on, he leaves the kingdom to his son, and his son could care less about the Jews. We look at the Book of Kings, things like this happen all the time. We would have kings that would tear down the strongholds, break down the high places, and then their sons would come and build high places again. And it was like this back and forth. So we see this again in the book of Ezra, where we have Cambyses, who is the son of Cyrus, and he ruled in 530 to 522 BC, and he did not care about the Jewish people, and he stopped the temple from being built. There was another king who ruled for about a year, but then right after that, in 522 BC, we have King Darius. And we're back in Ezra again. It's chapter 6. King Darius is the king of Persia, and he wants to rebuild the temple again. And the temple was completed in 516 BC. So King Darius is delivering this message because he's hearing from the Lord as well. Now, therefore, the governor of province of the West Euphrates River, any colleagues, and other officials west of the Euphrates River stay away from there. Do not disturb the construction of the temple. Let it be rebuilt on its original site, and do not hinder the governor of Judah and the elders of the Jews in their work. Moreover, he says, I hereby decree that you are to help the elders and the Jews as they rebuild the temple, and you must pay for the full construction costs without delay from my taxes collected in the province west of the Euphrates River, so that the work will not be interrupted. So not only did King Darius come in and say, listen, we're rebuilding this temple and it's going to be completed, but guess what? You're going to pay for it. How cool is that? So right here, we have the temple being rebuilt. But again, we're showing the culture of Persia respects the Jews. Now, at this time, are they up here with the Persians? I wouldn't say that, but there is a respect for them, and there's a respect for their God, and there's a respect for Jerusalem, Judah, and the rebuilding of the temple. So here we are in the book of Esther, and King Xerxes is reigning, and it's 486 BC, and it starts off in the book of Esther, which I think is great, because every time I read this in the first chapter, it says, this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. And I'm like, what happened? What happened during the time? Well, I just told you. This is what happened during the time. The temple is rebuilt. He's the king of Persia. He's over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At the time of King Xerxes, he reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia, and the princes and the nobles. And he did this for 180 days. So I want to go back before we jump into the banquet. Listen, he is in control of 127 of the provinces. Okay. Now I'm just reminding you that only a small portion of the Jews went back to Jerusalem and Judah. So right now in Persia, there are Jews. Think about the time of enslavement even here in America. So when Africans were enslaved into America, when slavery was over, how many of us went back to Africa? I don't know, right? Most of us were here. We settled here. We created lives here. So when we think of slavery, we don't have this discussion of after slavery, Africans went back to their land. No, after slavery, you kind of adapt to the land that you're enslaved in, right? So there were a lot of Jews in Persia. They're living, they're functioning. Now, similar to African Americans, at that time where they were like free, just freed and just trying to find themselves, they weren't here, as far as socially and economically based off of the way America was developed. It's the same way in Persia. The Jews are there, but they're not here socially and economically in the way that the culture is in Persia. If you're a Persian, bam, right? So we have to think about the culture of it. Yes, the Jews are functioning, but they're not high status, right? They're not high status. So King Xerxes, he is running a massive empire. He's got 127 provinces. He holds this banquet for his military leaders and all the folks that are in the royal palace and in leadership in the royal palace for 180 days. Could you imagine kicking it for 180 days and doing whatever you want for 180 days? So he's showing off his wealth and his riches to all of these leaders. He's showing off what he has, what he's working with, who he is. But when I think about it, did he put in the hard work for this? I mean, we've got some other kings back here, right? That we've talked about that have put in some hard work. But here's Xerxes, and he's celebrating, and this is his kingdom now. And then we get to the 7 day celebration. This is where it becomes really important. Not only did Xerxes decide he wanted to celebrate with his leaders, he created a 7 day celebration for the least to the greatest in Sidel and Susa. So that would mean everyone from the least. Remember, we talked about what the status, the social status, social economic status, cultural status of that time. And all the guests are to be served all of what they wish. So at this time, he's showing off. Not only has he spent 180 days, which to me is like a summertime. I always was like, that's summertime. I mean, so let's just envision he's kicking it in the summertime, and he kicked it all summer. Right? He kicked it all summer. He kicked it all summer with the leaders, and then he decides for 7 days, I'm going to kick it with my community. So imagine the community that you live in right now, and a king or your mayor or what have you, just allowing your whole community to kick it and drink whatever it is that they want, get whatever it is that they want until you decide that they're done. So he's showing off now to not just the leaders, but the community. And now he wants his wife, Queen Vashti, to be shown off to all of those in Sidel of Susa. And so at the same time, she's kicking it, right? She's having a party, okay? Yes, his wife is having a party. She is entertaining the women in the royal palace. And on that 7th day, he's requesting her to come. And she refuses. So I want to stop there. So we go back again to the history of why is she refusing? Some historians might say, was he asking her to come naked because he's asking her to come with her crown? Maybe, right? It's not written that that's what he was asking. But either way, she's saying no. What gives her the idea that she can even say no to a king? Okay. Well, what I did was I looked at the time of woman in Persia in 486 BC, and in 522 to 486 BC, marking the transition from King Cambyses to Darius in the Persian Empire. Women were particularly royal, and women that were particularly royal and elite enjoyed significant autonomy, economic rights, freedoms uncommon in other ancient societies. So any woman that was of royal status had a feeling or treatment of superiority, right? And so they managed estates, they led businesses, they traveled freely, they held positions as supervisors and economically, showing women receiving wages that were sometimes higher than male workers. So this is Persia at this time. The royal women of that time, I want to emphasize the royal women of that time, they had a little bit more social economic status and freedom and rights and opportunities, if that makes sense. So that could also be one of the reasons that she felt like she could do whatever she wanted to do and say no. But then I found out Queen Vashti is the granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, remember that puzzle I was telling you about with the Bible? Yes, back in Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar, remember? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Yes, you remember him? That guy way back there, that is Queen Vashti's grandfather. Now, I don't know how far removed, but she comes from royalty. So, is there a combativeness right now between her and her husband? Like he's the king, but she might be thinking, hold up, Papa used to run all of this. So this is mine too. I can do whatever I want to do. There's a possibility of that too. For whatever reason that she said no, she said no. it made me think about today. And I do want folks to just give me your thoughts and comments. But one of the things that I thought about is here we are in a world today where women can have businesses. Sometimes we make more than men, depending on the situation. We can run businesses. We're free to travel. Um, we manage estates. Uh, Everything that they're talking about during Persia between 522 and 486 for these royal women, modern women today in westernized thinking over here in America, that's what I'm going to talk about. We have those same freedoms. And sometimes we struggle when it comes to our relationships with our husbands, right? Because sometimes we can make more than our husbands. Sometimes we begin to, like, when it comes to dating, we begin to struggle with dating because we might own a business. And then when we're dating someone, it's like, where's your business? I own my business. How come you don't own your business? There was this debate a few years ago about women who make a certain income. Would you date a bus driver? There were a lot of women that said no. There's oftentimes debates on, you know, will you allow the first date to be at a chain restaurant or do you need to go to a 5-star? Women are really feeling themselves today, right? And so that creates this combativeness when it comes to dating, meeting, meeting men and starting new relationships. Maybe you're already in a relationship and you're starting to feel yourself. I always bring this up. Don't come at me, because if y'all are part of the Cardi B kind of thing, there's people that love her. And listen, I get it. She has all the personality in the world. I think she's great when it comes to certain things and advocating for certain things and all of that. However, regardless of all of those things, she was a wife. And so during that, she became pregnant by somebody else, left her husband, got pregnant, all of that before the divorce was even final. And we live in a society where people were going, yeah, go Cardi. No, no. And that's kind of what we see here with Queen Vashti and King Xerxes. He's up here offset, right? Having his party for his 7 days. She's over here, Cardi B, having her party with the royal palace for 7 days. And then when he's calling for her, she's like, I don't have to come to you. I already got my own. That's my thought. I want to hear your thoughts, but that's my thought. My grandfather ran this. I come from royalty. I can do what I want to do. I'm not coming over there. And the moment that Queen Vashti said no, it changed and created a paradigm shift in the way that women were viewed and how the king at that time wanted men to take back control of their households. And so we're going to talk about that. The king became furious in Esther chapter 1, verse 12. He spoke to the wise men who understood the times. And so I want to go back to that in chapter 1, verse 12. It says, but when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. And the king became furious and burned with anger. See how the enemy works? He try to mess with your voice when you're trying to preach. But we ain't doing that over here. I'm going to take a sip. In verse 13, he says, since it was customary for the king to consult with experts in the matter of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. And these wise men, they were seven nobles of Persia and Media who had special access to the king and were the highest in the kingdom. And according to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti is what he's asking. And he's asking these 7 nobles. So then there's something else here that we can talk about as far as like how he managed to control himself, right? Because I think about my husband right now. He's not consulting with anybody. If he's like sending someone for me and I go to them, I'm like, no, tell him I said no. He's going to come and be like, what's the problem? Like, what are you, because we're married, right? Like, what's the problem? Now, at that time, it's a little bit different than my husband coming over and being like, hey, what's the problem? Like, what are you upset about? He's the king. There's a certain status. He completely felt disrespected. And then not only just, I mean, we got to think. So he spent this 180 days with just the leadership, the king, of the kingdom, of the royal palace and the military. But for these 7 days, he's dealing with community. So he's embarrassed. The whole community. He's throwing this 7-day party and she's refusing. He managed to really take a second, breathe, and not react. And so he consulted with these 7 wise men and he followed the protocol. This is one of the things that I wrote down. He followed the protocol and didn't make an emotional decision. And he based it off of consulting the wise men who knew the laws, customs, and legal precedents of the Persian Empire. Sometimes we can't just react. We need to consult. And at that time, he's consulting with the wise men that know the laws. He's consulting with the wise men that know the laws. Who are you consulting with? When something happens in your life, when something makes you angry, when something just totally trips you out, are you taking the time to consult with God? Because God is our wise man. He knows the laws. He knows the protocols. He knows the laws and the, what did I put? The legal precedents of the times that we are living in today. And so I'm giving the kings a thumbs up here because he's really taking the time to consult. So the noble stated that her doing this, her rejecting coming to him, could change the kingdom forever. And King Xerxes could not allow that. So what they were saying, that her decision to not come to the king as requested will cause all women to reject and despise their husbands to no end, to disrespect. It says right here, therefore, if it pleases the king, this is in verse 19, chapter 1, verse 19 of Esther. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Queen Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone who is better than she. And we're going to get to that. Let me go back to this. They were afraid that if she got away with this, of rejecting the king, that all women at that time would start rejecting their husbands. And I would say that that could be something that could absolutely happen. What's happening today in our world, right? When we think about, and I can get some backlash on this, but I really don't care. That's fun. I really don't care. However, when I think about my husband, there is definitely a level of respect that I owe him and honor him, whether it be spiritually or just even as him, just being my husband as an individual and as a person. And sometimes I think that those things get lost in the sauce. You know, our world is so full of so many different people and personalities, and now women are just out here doing wonderful things. But does that mean that we should reject our husbands? Now, granted, I don't know the background, and I don't know the background of their story. I don't know what all she's upset about. However, when I hear this part, and we look in chapter 1, verse 19, when I go down, it says, also let the king give her royal position to someone who is better than she. She lost her position right there. That's what today's session is about. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about the history of Persia. We talked about, how King Xerxes got here. We're talking about how women are viewed during this time. We're trying to guess, why is Queen Vashti saying no, right? I'm not coming to you. But when I hear that in verse 19, that she lost her position and to give her position to someone who is better than she, that lets me know that the position that she had was a really good position and she lost it. Okay? So whether she was mad at her husband or whether she was upset with him, whatever it is, that position was meaningful. What position are you in today? What is your position that you feel like you can do whatever you want to do and get away with it? Or you're bored with it, so you're not working as hard? Or you're just like, whatever, I want to do something else. I'm more valuable than this. Or you're just not putting anything into it and it's becoming void. You're not seeing anything because you're not putting anything into it. What is the position that you're in that you could actually, if you really reflect and look at it, you could lose? You know, one of the things that I tell my younger son, he is so great at basketball. I love how he plays basketball, but I always share with him, always work hard. And not that he doesn't, but I always want to remind him that even though you're really great at this skill, you still need to work hard and you still need to practice, because there is somebody that you can't see who wants your position. And sometimes we can lose our position because we think we got it in the bag. So because we think we got it in the bag, we don't feel like we have to work hard enough. Listen, I'm a business owner. I own a business. And for years, people have told me, like, listen, the last couple of years, like, you should be getting out of this business. You should just have somebody else do that stuff. Now you can move on and do something else. And every time I would do that, I began to start seeing that my business wasn't running the way that it needed to run. And I could feel myself spiritually like, listen, I know what the world is saying. The world is saying, listen, once you start a business, the goal is that you can leave that business and start something else, and this business can function on its own. That's great. That sounds wonderful. But the business that God gave me, Lily Price, has to run the way that God wants it to run. It's more than business. It's ministry. It's specific. So every time I would tear myself away and start trying to look at other things, this over here, this business over here, didn't seem to look as concrete and as strong as I wanted it to. And then it dawned on me, you can still do other things, but this business needs to be a priority because I gave it to you and there's something special that I need you to do right now. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always going to have to be there all day, every day. That's not what that means. But right now, my spirit says it's important. Sometimes when I make these videos, I'm rushing, I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm not always consistent. But I know in my spirit that I'm supposed to be doing something. What is it that, even though maybe you're unhappy doing it and you feel overwhelmed sometimes, that you know you need to be doing it anyway? Put all of that power into whatever it is God blessed you with. One of the things that I always like to use as an example is I've had women come to me and say, you know, I'm just tired of being a stay-at-home mom. All I do is watch kids. All I do is this. I'm not impacting the world in any way. I'm not able to do this and that. Listen, the world has us fooled that women are supposed to be out here doing all these different things. If you are just a single mom or just a stay-at-home mom and you're raising your kids, do you know the ministry that you have in your hands? Do you know the impact that you have on your children? When God has something for you, He will open the door, but He has to trust you with what He's giving you now. And if right now what He's giving you is just being at home and feeding into those kids, then do it and do it well. Because when we look at Queen Vashti, she lost her position. She was a queen. She could probably have whatever she wanted. She could do whatever she wanted. And it sounds like she took it for granted. No, I'm not coming. I'm not coming over there where you're at. I got my own party going on. And just like that, God is already thinking of Esther. Just like that. Queen Vashti can never again enter the presence of the king. She is giving her position to someone else and giving her position to someone better. She didn't appreciate where she was. I really want to encourage people to appreciate where they are. I know what it's like to be in a place that seems desolate. And maybe you're doing the work of God, maybe you're not. Maybe you're praying all the time, maybe you're not. Maybe you're talking to God all the time, maybe you're not. Wherever you're at, God is going to use that space. But don't take it for granted. Find the goodness of the space you're in. Find the goodness of the place that you are. Thank God for the place so that He can open the door to something even greater. As we go on into the book of Esther, we're going to talk about where Esther came from, who she is, and what her thought process is as a young Jewish girl at that time. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week. Please tap in, hit that like and subscribe button, comment, share, reshare, whatever it is, so that we can iron sharpen iron. Imagine me, imagine you, imagine us really stepping into our potential, appreciating where we are, even if we don't like it, and knowing that God has something better. See you later.